So we have some questions from the audience that we will try to knock out a few of them right now, and then we will try and knock out a few of them as we go. So this one is one that we've gotten online. So people are writing online. They're writing questions in online. The question is, and Carolina, this is probably right up your alley, but we'll let whoever wants to take a stab at it. Research has shown that pilots may be incapable of immediately recalling basic training when they are startled or surprised, especially when there's a fear component. If this is true, how can our approach to flight training address this? So who would like to take a stab at that? Yeah, so did you say you'd like to take a...
Well, I think that's the importance of flight training and proficiency and just practice. That's why we practice emergencies, so it doesn't take you by surprise. You were talking, Robert, you were talking about the in-flight fire. So it's the importance of simulators, chair flying, having the SOPs and standards and knowing the procedures and practice.
Great, and I think maybe I've heard the term of the law of primacy or something. You go back to what you've been learned. So, okay, and Dave, I think you wanted to take a stab at that.
Sure, in conjunction with the training, I look back to the evolution of from a regulatory perspective of the stall warning system. I think it goes back to about 1951 or so when we mandated stall warning systems. And I think stall warnings are good, and they are good to use in training. But I think what we're seeing with some of the research that we've been sponsoring is that there is a startle factor, even with the stall warning there. And so I think backing up and looking at the precursors to the startle factor is really important. And so if you had some systems that you could train with to give you notice prior to the stall warning, that might be a viable solution.
Great, thank you. Next question is from Mike, from the audience.
Okay, this is a little bit long here. This has to do with UPRT training, upset prevention and recovery training. How can we have flight training providers incorporate UPRT into their programs, especially in light of no existing regulatory requirement, the financially lean training environment, and UPRT is perceived as aerobatics?
I'll take a stab at that, Mike. When we take a look at formulating regulations, we balance the costs and the benefits of those things, of the addition of a new training requirement per se, like this. And where we can't find the benefit to outweigh cost, we try to incorporate as much as we can into guidance material. That guidance material then gives the allowance to folks in industry to incorporate that into their training program. We really look to industry to help self-regulate, and this is a prime example of that. I look at the air carrier industry. Before this was a requirement, they took it upon themselves to start incorporating it into their training programs. This is another example of that in general aviation.
I'm a huge believer in upset recovery training. Every time I've given it, if somebody's not had it before, you simply give them a real eye-opener by rolling the airplane like that, and the recovery is that, but they always split S instead because they see an eye full of ground. But I think I like the approach the FAA has taken, which is to leave it to us in industry, but if we can incentivize flight schools to incorporate it and make it fun and give people the incentive to pursue that kind of thing, it's enriching their own ability to be professionals and to be professional pilots and to understand how to manage new limitations that they didn't get in the basic training.
Great, and there was a component of that question regarding aerobatics. So, Patty, you give aerobatic instruction, I believe.
Yeah, it sounded a little negative, like how can you not see upset recovery training as aerobatics? And I think aerobatics scares people, the term does. They think, oh, it's scary, or maybe it's too much fun, or maybe it's not serious enough, and it's, of course, none of those things. It's upset training is a little different in that it teaches people to stay out of trouble, and it doesn't take things quite as far. But if you take a good aerobatics course, it doesn't have to be long, a few hours. You're going to incorporate all of the upset recovery techniques in a course like that. During World War II, aerobatics was required by all pilots. I don't believe you could solo in the 40s until you could do a loop, a roll, a half Cuban 8, and a 3-turn spin before soloing. So if you go back to some of these World War II flight manuals, they're wonderful books. It's really all, what I feel is all you need today is to go back and they teach you good stick and rudder techniques, how to stay out of trouble, how to use your rudder, basic aerobatics. It's not so you can become an aerobatic performer, but it makes you a complete pilot. And so if you have those skills, when there is an emergency or something happens, you're going to revert to your basic good stick and rudder skills. You're not going to do something different when there's an emergency. You're going to go back to what you know. That's what's going to keep you safe.
Let's go, and Tim LeBaron will ask another question from the audience.
All righty, this is another rudder question. It says, as a pilot, I learned to coordinate turns with the rudder. As an engineer in the aviation community, I learned that the rudder can get pilots into all types of trouble. I am not certain most recreational pilots understand the proper use of the rudder. Does the panel agree, and is there a way to fix this issue?
Well, I'll start, just very brief. Yes, I certainly wholeheartedly agree that basic stick and rudder skills are diminishing, and being a quality aviator around those aspects. As we get more technologically advanced, as we become more systems managers with all of the technological equipment, those things tend to get left as less of a priority. And how do you fix it? Go fly gliders.
Great, thank you. And Member Weiner, you've got a question from online, I believe.
Yes, I do. Backing up to the topic of the focused flight review and the recency of experience topic, should we be looking at this kind of training more often than once every 2 years?
So the focused flight review, it's a program that I think everybody's embracing. This is the way to do a good flight review. There's been many attempts over the years to get us away from the 1 hour in the air, 1 hour on the ground. FAA has had a best practice out there for a few years. I encourage everybody to look at that. Obviously, when AOPA launches the course for the broader industry, it's going to be good. The question we really need to ask every pilot is, kind of batted around tongue-in-cheek in private conversations, who's your flight instructor? Why doesn't every pilot out there have the ability to answer the question, who is their regular flight instructor? Somebody that you just don't go and fly with every 2 years because you find them at the local airport, but on a regular basis, after the winter months, haven't flown a while, flying a new aircraft, do you have a go-to person that you can actually go and fly with?
Thank you. As you see, we are getting questions from the audience, and we're trying to address those.